It's 5:30 a.m., the 18th of July 2025. Night clings to the Taiwan Strait, a narrow ribbon of water where the world's nerves live close to the surface. On JS Maya, DDG-179, radar scopes bloom with returns, merchant ships on the lane, fishing boats drifting, and two hard, fast tracks pushing in from the west. The bridge is quiet, practiced. Orders move in short words. Helm holds a steady course along the international route. In the Combat Information Center, green light washes over faces as operators call ranges and bearings. A Chinese destroyer's silhouette slides out of the dark. Type 052D, its deck lights stark, its mast alive with sensors. A Type 54 Ampere's frigate follows, closer than comfort. Loudspeakers ready. Maya's navigation lights burn constant. The ship answers with a clear radio call, lawful passage. From the loudhailer behind, a spray-white China Coast Guard 3901 class prowls across the lane, her hoses glinting. Then another voice breaks in on VHF flat. Calm. American. United States Navy warship. Northbound. The geometry tightens. 3 flags. 1 narrow strait. If anyone misreads a signal now, steel meets steel, and the headlines write themselves. The Taiwan Strait is only about 70 nautical miles wide at its narrowest point. For outsiders, it may look like just another stretch of water, but for Asia and the world, it is a lifeline. Every day, tankers and cargo ships thread this narrow passage, carrying fuel, microchips, and consumer goods. If traffic stops here, factories slow, shelves empty, and prices climb across the globe. That is why warships watch this lane so closely. For Japan, the decision to send JS Maya northbound is more than navigation, it is about credibility. Tokyo wants to prove that its navy can operate alongside the US, not just behind it. For Washington, the appearance of the USS Preble from the opposite end of the strait is no accident. Together, the Allies are staging what sailors call a freedom of navigation operation, a deliberate transit meant to show that these waters remain open to all nations under international law. On the Chinese side, the motive is equally clear. Beijing claims these waters as its own, dismissing the idea of an international strait. Its destroyer and frigate are not just patrolling, they are performing, making sure the world sees that any foreign presence will be challenged. To back them up, the Coast Guard and even civilian fishing vessels are drawn into the dance, blurring the line between law enforcement, militia, and Navy. This is what makes the morning of the 18th of September so volatile. One side insists on international rules, the other asserts national sovereignty. Neither can back down without losing face, and neither can push too far without risking collision or worse. Commanders on all 3 bridges know it. One wrong helm order, one misread radar lock, and suddenly the standoff becomes an international crisis. For sailors, the tension is not abstract. It is the risk of steel on steel, missile against missile, lives hanging on judgment calls in seconds. For governments, it is the balance between deterrence and provocation, a tightrope act played out in front of the cameras. And for you watching, it raises a simple but powerful question. If you were on the bridge of JS Maya, would you hold course to prove your right of passage, or turn aside to avoid a clash? Comment 1 for hold course, 9 for turn, and don't forget to subscribe for the next chapter of this unfolding story. On one side sails Japan's JS Maya, a modern Aegis destroyer built to shield fleets and cities. Its heart is a powerful radar able to see threats hundreds of miles away, linked to vertical launch cells that can fire surface-to-air missiles, anti-sub rockets, or interceptors against ballistic weapons. On deck sits a 5-inch gun for surface duels, and tucked aft, a helicopter hangar with a Seahawk ready to lift off. Maya is not the largest ship in the Pacific, but it is among the most capable, designed to stand in the line when things get dangerous. Facing her across the lane is China's Type 052D destroyer, bristling with long-range missiles. Its combat system mirrors the American and Japanese style, with phased array radar sweeping the skies and vertical launch cells ready for salvos. Alongside, it runs a Type 54 Ampere frigate, smaller but agile, with its own mix of anti-air and anti-ship missiles. To add pressure, A Zhaotu-class Coast Guard cutter trails close, carrying a water cannon and deck gun, projecting Beijing's claim that these waters are its own. From the north comes the USS Preble, an American Arleigh Burke-class destroyer. Its weapons are nearly twin to Maya's: interceptors, Tomahawk missiles, close-in defense guns, and a Seahawk helicopter. Its electronic warfare gear can jam radars and mislead missiles in the final seconds of flight. The U.S. presence is both a reassurance to allies and a direct signal to China. America will not leave partners alone in this contest. All three ships carry trained crews drilled to handle these tense moments. Radios keep crackling, engines hold steady revolutions. But beneath the calm, every sailor knows what is at stake: national pride, deterrence, and the line between warning and war. And that is where you come in. If you think Japan and the US combined can outweigh China's numbers, press 1. If you believe Beijing's sheer persistence makes it stronger here, press 9. And of course, subscribe to follow how this standoff unfolds in the next moves. By 6:15 a.m., the situation hardens. The Type 54 Ampere frigate swings closer to JS Maya, closing the gap to barely 1,000 meters. Its loudspeaker booms in Mandarin, demanding the Japanese ship leave what it calls Chinese territorial seas. On Maya's bridge, officers remain stone-faced. Their reply is steady: this is an international waterway, and the ship will continue lawful passage. A coded signal light flashes, reinforcing the message without raising the temperature. Meanwhile, the Zhaotu-class Coast Guard cutter turns its hoses toward Taiwanese fishing boats trailing behind Maya. Arcs of water lash small decks, forcing trawlers to sheer away. To the Japanese crew, it is a reminder the encounter is more than warship against warship. Civilians are caught in the middle, and Beijing is using every lever at once. Minutes later, the O-52D destroyer sharpens the tension. It alters course deliberately, cutting across Maya's bow at less than 500 yards, close enough that the wake slaps against the hull. The maneuver is dangerous, a show of force that risks collision. On Maya's deck, the whistle shrieks 5 short blasts, the universal danger signal, but the ship holds its line. Inside the Combat Information Center, operators track the Chinese vessel, fingers near fire control consoles. Still, the captain resists arming weapons. The rules of engagement are clear: defensive action only if locked by hostile radar or fired upon. The standoff stretches. Every ship now broadcasts position reports, not just to each other, but to the world. Civilian tracking networks pick up the movements, and the drama spreads across social media in real time. Far from the strait, in Tokyo, Washington, and Beijing, officials' phones buzz with urgent updates. For sailors, none of that matters. What counts is the next turn of a rudder, the next tone in a headset, the next blip on radar. At 7 a.m., a new factor enters. From the north, USS Preble, DDG-88, makes its approach, closing the geometry into a tense triangle. Its captain calls on VHF, voice calm but edged. United States Navy warship conducting lawful passage. Any attempt to endanger navigation will be documented. The message is both reassurance and warning. On the Chinese bridge, officers exchange sharp glances. The game has shifted. Instead of isolating a Japanese destroyer, they now face a combined US-Japan presence. The triangle locks into place. Maya on one leg, Preble on another, and the Chinese O-52D anchoring the third. Inside this narrow strait, every helm order is magnified, every radio call a potential spark. Engines rumble, sailors scan through binoculars, and radar beams sweep harder. The risk of miscalculation climbs with every passing minute. In these moments, escalation is not about missiles flying, it is about perception, resolve, and the thin line between intimidation and accident. One aggressive turn could trigger a chain reaction no one can stop. For crews on deck, the choice is stark. Maintain discipline and endure the pressure, or risk a move history will record as the first shot of a new crisis in Asia. The minutes after 7:05 a.m. stretch into the most dangerous sequence yet. The Type O-52D destroyer swings wide, then turns sharply, cutting back toward Maya's course. Distance shrinks, 400 yards, then 350, The Japanese bridge crew braces for impact. Every order is clipped, calm, drilled into muscle memory. Steady course. Engines maintain speed. The destroyer refuses to yield. On Maya's deck, sailors clutch railings as the Chinese hull looms larger. In the Combat Information Center, the radar operator calls out. The enemy's fire control radar is sweeping harder, skimming just short of a lock. One more step, and it could be read as hostile intent. The Japanese captain's hand hovers near the weapons release key, but holds. The mission is freedom of navigation, not escalation. Suddenly, the Type 54 Ampere frigate makes its own move. It alters course to pass across Maya's stern, leaving only 300 yards of clearance. The narrow lane becomes a trap. The water churns as wakes overlap, buffeting the Japanese destroyer. Whistles blare, and 5 short blasts cry again across the strait. On Maya's deck, the 5-inch gun is manned, ammunition ready. The phalanx whirs, spinning up, but not firing. From the north, USS Preble reacts. Its captain orders the MH-60R Seahawk airborne. The helicopter rises, cameras rolling, transmitting every frame to higher command. Over the radio comes a firm declaration. Unsafe maneuvers recorded. Responsibility will be clear. The presence of the American aircraft changes the geometry China knows. Every aggressive step is now documented and broadcast beyond the strait, yet tension only spikes higher. The O-52D's missiles are reported hot, hatches powered, and systems awake. Maya answers by bringing a pair of SM-2 interceptors online in its vertical launch cells. Preble does the same with ESSMs. For a moment, the triangle of steel is balanced on a knife edge. One radar lock, one misfire, and salvos could cross the sky within seconds. On deck, sailors stare at the opposing bridge through binoculars, close enough to see figures in uniform. Engines thrum, horns blast, and water foams as 3 great hulls circle within a strait, too narrow for comfort. For the men and women aboard, it is not theory. It is the split-second reality of steel, fire, and lives in the balance. The standoff teeters. And here's where you step in. If you were commanding JS Maya, would you hold course to prove your right of passage, press 1, or yield to avoid collision, press 9? Either way, subscribe so you don't miss how this clash resolves in the final act. By 7:40 a.m., the crisis eases. Orders ripple through the Chinese formation. The O-52D destroyer steadies its helm and pulls away, opening distance to over 2 nautical miles. The 54 Ampere frigate follows, sliding back into line. The Coast Guard cutter throttles down, no longer spraying its hoses. The geometry that had pressed so tight begins to stretch, giving every ship breathing room. On JS Maya, tension is still thick, but sailors exhale for the first time in an hour. Damage control teams sweep decks, checking for stress or collision marks. In the CIC, operators keep tracking every contact, knowing the shadowing will continue. Over the intercom, the captain's voice is measured. Transit continues, mission intact. The destroyer has held course. For the Americans on USS Preble, the outcome is just as important. By arriving from the north and standing firm, the ship showed that the US will not leave allies isolated. The presence of the helicopter recording every maneuver ensured the encounter could not be denied. For Beijing, the retreat is not defeat, but recognition. The cost of pressing further could have triggered an accident with 2 opponents at once. Beyond the strait, the meaning is larger. For Tokyo, this proves its navy can stand in contested waters without Washington taking the first step. For the US, it reaffirms commitment and deters attempts to squeeze partners. For China, it is a reminder that pressure carries risks, and staged shows of force can backfire. The Taiwan Strait remains a choke point where trade, military power, and pride intersect. A single near miss can ripple into diplomacy, markets, and security across the Pacific. That morning, the 3 navies stepped back from the brink. The next encounter may not end as calmly. Closing question. Did Japan and the US send the stronger signal by standing firm, press 1? Or did China prove persistence is its own power, press 9? Either way, subscribe now to see how the next standoff unfolds in the skies above the East China Sea. At exactly 0923 hours on the 14th of June 2025, the USS Princeton was slicing through the calm waters of the South China Sea on what was supposed to be yet another routine freedom of navigation patrol. Her spy radar, the most advanced naval sensor in the world, suddenly painted a return that shifted the crew's mood from routine to razor-sharp focus. A Chinese Type 052D destroyer previously loitering at a comfortable 200 kilometers away had just surged from 18 to 30 knots in under 90 seconds. Unbeknownst to the Americans, the destroyer's captain had just received fresh orders from Beijing. Intercept the Americans and force them to blink first. But Beijing was about to relearn an old lesson. Challenging the US Navy in open water has never been a wise idea. Far to the west, the massive silhouette of the Nimitz-class carrier USS Nimitz anchored the strike group's formation. This wasn't just a collection of ships, it was 104,600 tons of American diplomacy, carrying 90 of the most advanced aircraft on the planet, keeping the world's busiest sea lanes open. For decades, American sailors had safeguarded this region, ensuring that $4 trillion in annual trade container, ships full of electronics bound for Best Buy, tankers loaded with liquefied natural gas, moved without interference. They were in international waters, a solid 180 nautical miles from the nearest Chinese territory. The mission was by the book. Predictable course, transparent intentions, professional conduct, the kind of seamanship that separates real navies from floating militias. 3 minutes later, at 0926, radar operators confirmed the contact. A Type 052D destroyer of the Chinese Navy, threat level assessed as moderate to high. In the Princeton's Combat Information Center, the tactical action officer studied the target's vector with calm detachment. With 122 vertical launch cells bristling with SM-6 missiles, the Princeton could erase any hostile ship from the map in seconds. At the destroyer's current speed, weapons engagement range was just 17 minutes away. The math was simple and terrifying for the Chinese. Their YJ-18 anti-ship missiles could close the distance in under 4 minutes once launched, but the Princeton's SM-6 second could swat them from the sky long before they got close. By 0929, the question from the Princeton's captain was straightforward. What's the probable intent? The answer came back without hesitation. At this heading and speed, the Chinese destroyer would enter weapons release range in just 14 minutes. The Combat Information Center recommended going to general quarters. The captain's reply was pure American steel. Let's see how badly they want to embarrass themselves first. He wasn't bluffing. The South China Sea at that moment was crowded not with warships, but with the lifeblood of global commerce. 46 merchant vessels moved within a 50-mile radius. A Singapore-flagged container ship stacked with semiconductor crates, a South Korean LNG tanker worth $200 million, and countless others whose safe passage depended on the US Navy's quiet but resolute presence. Should Beijing succeed in militarizing these waters, every one of them would be at risk. The strike group's cooperative engagement capability went to work at 0930, seamlessly sharing the Princeton's threat data across the entire formation. The Nimitz, her flight deck buzzing with operations, subtly shifted her position. The destroyers Chung Hoon and Kidd adjusted stations, tightening the defensive ring around the carrier. Any attack against the Nimitz would mean running a gauntlet of American firepower from multiple directions. Every move was deliberate, professional, and precise. No wild maneuvers, no panic. Just quiet confidence backed by overwhelming capability. From above, it would have looked like a chessboard slowly locking an opponent into checkmate. By 0935, the tactical picture was about to get even more complicated. From high above at 25,000 feet, an E-2D Hawkeye orbiting in its racetrack pattern reported a change in the theater. Multiple aircraft were lifting off from the Chinese carrier Shandong. Their radar signatures matched J-15 fighters, China's answer to the American F/A-18, now climbing and heading south. If Beijing's plan was to intimidate, they had just committed to raising the stakes. From the Hawkeye's vantage point, the incoming J-15 second looked determined if a bit overconfident. Climbing hard, their formation arrowed south toward the American strike group. But the air controllers aboard the E-2D quickly noticed something almost comical. The J-15 were struggling to gain altitude. The culprit was no mystery. China's ski jump launch system, the pride of the Shandong, severely limited takeoff weight. That meant reduced fuel and smaller weapons loads an uncomfortable handicap when facing a fully fueled American carrier air wing. While the drama played out in the skies, a new contact appeared below the waves. Sonar operators aboard the Princeton picked up the telltale acoustic signature of a diesel-electric submarine, bearing 80 nautical miles away. Classification: probable type 039. Instead of the stealthy whisper of a professional crew, this boat was broadcasting its presence like a freight train. The captain's dry remark, "Any competent submarine crew would be mortified," earned a few chuckles in the CIC. Beijing's intentions were becoming clear. This was a multi-domain intimidation campaign. A destroyer pressing from the west, a submarine creeping from the southwest, and carrier-borne fighters sweeping down from the north. On paper, it was a coordinated show of force. In reality, it was a parade of mismatched equipment. 1,992nd-era surface ships, ski jump fighters that burn fuel faster than they climbed, and noisy submarines that might as well be pinging their coordinates over the radio. For the US Navy, this wasn't a fight, it was a live-fire rehearsal without the firing. American pilots and sailors calmly cataloged every radar pulse, every maneuver, every acoustic note, feeding it into an ever-growing library of Chinese capabilities and weaknesses. If Beijing thought they were rattling Washington's nerves, they were badly mistaken. At 0943, an RC-135B rivet joint, a lumbering Boeing 707 crammed with electronic intelligence gear, added another layer to the picture. For 6 hours, it had been orbiting well outside the engagement zone, hoovering up every emission from the Chinese task group. The Mandarin linguists on board were, by all accounts, having a field day. One particularly telling intercept came through. Dark Star confirms Chinese pilots requesting permission for aggressive maneuvers. Repeat, requesting clearance to buzz our ships. In other words, even their aggression needed approval from faraway Beijing. By the time that permission came, the tactical situation would have shifted 3 times over. The Americans were operating inside the opponent's decision loop, a position from which victory is all but inevitable. By 0947, the crisis slid to the brink. The Chinese destroyer's Type 346 Ampere phased array radar stopped its wide search and snapped into a hard lock on the USS Nimitz fire control quality, unmistakable and menacing. In naval terms, it was the digital equivalent of raising a pistol, thumbing the hammer, and pointing at the carrier's chest. Many navies would have answered with immediate counter-illumination or even preemptive defensive fire. Inside the Princeton CIC, discipline ruled. Fire recontrol radars stayed in standby. Voices were calm. Checklists flowed. Yet every firing solution was refining in real time. SMI 6-second and SMI 2-second in surface mode. Harpoons from other screens. The carrier air wing overhead angles of attack multiplied, while the destroyer's options dwindled. The American crew logged every detail: bearing, range, pulse repetition, time on, time off. The lock held for exactly 30 seconds, just long enough for Beijing to boast, "We could have fired, not long enough to trigger US rules of self-defense." Then came a rash play from above. A lone JF-15 broke formation and screamed down on a Hornet in what pilots call a thump, an intimidation pass. The FA-118 driver, Top Gun trained, rolled, inverted, pulled, and slid neatly into the Chinese fighter's 6 o'clock. His helmet display painted a perfect cue. An AIM-910 would have raced straight up the tailpipe. For 3 taut seconds, the solution was solid. The trigger never moved. Professionalism over impulse. Below the thermal layer, the last piece of China's act stumbled. The Type 039 diesel-electric boat tracked quietly for nearly an hour, edged closer under cover of the ocean's temperature gradient. At 0951, it made a critical error, raising its snorkel to recharge just 15,000 yards off the cruiser. Sonar sang out, "Probable type 039, bearing 159, making noise like a freight train. Position fixed within meters, acoustic fingerprint already in the library." Had shots been ordered, and ASROC would have been in the water within seconds, and the contact would have become artificial reef. What Beijing billed as a coordinated show of force had boxed itself in carrier to the northwest, destroyer to the west, submarine to the southwest. If shooting started, none of the three would likely survive the first 5 minutes. At precisely 14:30 hours, the USS Nimitz shifted from measured patience to overwhelming presence. In the largest single carrier launch in years, her deck crew executed a symphony of motion honed by decades of practice. 48 aircraft roared into the sky, Super Hornets loaded with live ordnance, EA 18-gram Growlers bristling with electronic warfare pods, and E-2D Hawkeyes ready to command the battle space. Catapults slammed forward at 45-second intervals, hurling jets into the humid South China Sea air. Steam vented in white plumes, the rhythmic thunder echoing for miles. The Growlers struck first not with missiles, but with electrons. Their ALQ-99 pods poured high-power jamming across the Chinese task group's radar bands, shredding situational awareness. On the Shandong screens, false targets bloomed by the hundreds. Real tracks winked out, and the picture dissolved into static and chaos. Controllers couldn't tell ghosts from threats. Everything was a threat. Then came the shock Beijing never saw coming. 6 nautical miles off the Shandong's port beam, the black, knife-like sail of a Virginia-class attack submarine broke the surface. For 8 silent days, she had shadowed the Chinese formation, evading every sonar ping, every sonobuoy, every ASW helicopter. The sub's captain ordered an emergency surface purely for effect. Water cascaded from her hull in the afternoon sun. Binoculars snapped to faces across the Chinese fleet. The unspoken message was unmistakable. We've been here the whole time, and you never knew. 90 seconds later, she slipped beneath the waves again, silent, invisible, untouchable. Above, the air war unfolded like a masterclass in modern combat. The Super Hornets, operating at full combat weight and linked via the secure Link 16 network, shared every radar picture in real time. One jet's eyes became every jet's eyes. The J-15 second, hamstrung by voice-only coordination and outdated sensors, were trapped in rigid, close formations, predictable, vulnerable. Growler jamming fractured Chinese communications. Pilots chasing radar ghosts burned precious fuel in fruitless maneuvers. Meanwhile, American fighters executed the wall stacked high, medium, and low in overlapping engagement zones. Any path toward the Nimitz was a suicide run through layers of missiles and cannon fire. By the 40-minute mark, Chinese fuel gauges were sinking fast. Ski jump launches had robbed the J-15 second of endurance. Their hard climbs burned what little reserve they had. Engagements ended the same way: American fighters in firing position, Chinese defensive and retreating. Each withdrawal bled more fuel until the inevitable happened. One by one, they peeled away toward the Shandong, bingo lights flashing, combat loads unused. For the Americans, this was not just a show of force. It was a live demonstration of total domain dominant surface, subsurface, and air executed with precision, patience, and devastating effect. By late afternoon, the Chinese formation had been stripped of any credible offensive punch. Their submarine had been humiliated, their destroyer pinned in a kill box, and their air wing bled dry by fuel starvation. The Shandong herself remained a lumbering liability, her ski jump deck emptying fighters faster than she could recover them. American pilots maintained disciplined pressure without firing a shot. Every intercept was precise, every maneuver deliberate. Hornets rolled into firing positions only to break away, sending an unmistakable message: we could end this anytime we choose. Above it all, the E-2D Hawkeyes continued to feed a perfect, God's eye tactical picture to every friendly asset within range, ensuring there were no surprises, only opportunities. At 1,623 hours, the decision finally came from Beijing. The Shandong's escorts altered course, their wakes curving away from the engagement zone. Official Chinese statements later claimed they were concluding scheduled exercises. No one present believed it. The truth was simpler. The attempt to project power in America's self-declared Sixth Great Lake had ended in quiet, undeniable retreat. The U.S. strike group held formation, neither chasing nor gloating. The mission remained the same as it had been at dawn: keep the sea lanes open, ensure that every merchant vessel in the region could continue its journey unmolested. From the Singapore-flagged container ships stacked with semiconductors to the South Korean LNG tanker worth hundreds of millions, the message was clear: you sail under our watch, and you sail safe. On the Princeton, logs were closed with meticulous detail radar locks, sonar tracks, intercept positions, all destined for intelligence archives. Each recorded signal and maneuver was another puzzle piece in understanding how the People's Liberation Army Navy operated under pressure. As the tropical twilight settled over the South China Sea, the Nimitz's flight deck hummed with recovery operations. One by one, Hornets trapped aboard, wings folding as they rolled to their spots. The carrier's island glowed under work lights, a city at sea finishing another day's work. For the American sailors, there was no celebration, just the quiet satisfaction of a job done to perfection. They had faced down a coordinated Chinese challenge across every domain: air, surface, subsurface, and had won without firing a single missile. The adversary had come to intimidate and to claim waters they had no right to. They left with a clear, unspoken lesson. In the South China Sea, the United States Navy is not just present, it owns the fight before it even begins.